Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 606. And today's date is March 3rd, 2015. And the title of this episode is U.S. Government Central Bankers are using the NDAA to indefinitely detain those who commit a belligerent act. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Greece, we understand Tsipras has made a deal with the Eurogroup. They have a 4-month emergency time frame here where they're going to get funds to help the country survive. During this time, we see they have a drachma designed, ready to go. They're purchasing gold. It seems like Russia is extending their hand and saying, hey, listen, if you exit the Eurozone, we'll remove the food ban and we can help you with whatever you need. So they might be doing things behind the scenes. I mean, of course, the people are a little confused right now. They're protesting, they're rioting, and they're very upset because they don't want austerity. They don't want more debt. They want a way to make a living. And this might get the Greek people a little bit more angry because what they're doing right now is they might be going in and dipping into the pension funds and other public sector entities to cover its funding needs. Greece is tapping into the cash reserves of pension funds and public sector entities through repo transaction as it scrambles to cover its funding needs this month. And we know they're tight for money. It's getting very difficult. But again, those people who have been working very hard and putting money away in their pension, these people are going to be very upset. The Syriza government is also putting in a draft legislation to tackle the humanitarian crisis in Greece. And as we know, the unemployment is skyrocketing. A lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people lost their jobs. They have no way to survive. So what they're doing is they're creating this legislation to help in 3 different areas. Basically, electricity, to help them get food, and help them to pay for a home to live in instead of living on the streets. And we can see that this is a program. We'll have to see if it goes forth. And what it consists of, free electricity for each household until the end of 2015. Rent allowance is going to be anywhere from 70 to 220 euros per month for up to about 30,000 households. And food supplies for about 300,000 people. And again, they are in a tough situation. We see the country is continually being put into more and more debt. And this time period of 4 months, they might be thinking about exiting right now and moving over to Russia, China, the BRICS system. And it seems like this is the way they're headed, and they're using this to exit the entire Eurozone system. But we'll have to watch this very carefully and see where this ends up. We see there are more layoffs coming down the line here. It sounds like Target is going to be laying off quite a number of employees. RBS says 1,000 plus. Some people are saying 10,000 are going to be laid off in the U.S. trading unit and other sectors of RBS. And we could see more and more of these companies are going to be laying off people. Why? Because real economy, not the stock market. The real economy is completely separate and apart from what is going on here. Yes, the Nasdaq's reaching all-time new highs. The Dow is reaching all-time new highs, and the S&P is reaching all-time new highs, but that has nothing to do with the economy. That is a manipulated market by the central bankers, and they can make it go up or down, do whatever, until that time comes where they completely lose control and the people and everyone that's investing in it just completely stop, or something happens and they lose control of it, and all their plunge protection, high frequency trading can't keep up with it. This is why they have the kill switch on the stock exchange, on the Nasdaq, because they know when that time comes, they're going to have to throw that switch. And they're hoping to link this up with some type of an event so they're not to blame. This is their plan here. And we see that people around the country, they're having trouble surviving. The income is not coming in. They're protecting their funds by putting it into their savings. They're not going out and spending them. We can see that auto sales are down. Ford, February, U.S. light vehicle sales fall 2%. GM, auto sales, missed the 5.9% expectation, down 4.2%. Nissan, February, U.S. auto sales, missed expectations at 3.8%. They only came in at 2.7%. Chrysler, they were expecting 8.2%. They only came in at 5.6%. Honda, they were expecting 11%. It only came in at 5%. So all this subprime borrowing and everything is not helping. It's starting to slow right now, and it's getting worse. And as we know delinquencies are surging. But of course, what they're going to do is they're going to blame this all on the weather. It's cold out. It's the weather. They always do this. Again, if people really need a car and their lease is coming up, they run out and they purchase the car. Because if they don't, they have no automobile. And I have to say, most of the people today are leasing their cars, which is basically renting. And we can see that as more and more people are losing their jobs, finding it tough to find a new job, and they have to get these part-time jobs, it makes it very hard to spend money because they're nervous, they're afraid, they're scared. What happens if I don't find this job? I better save whatever I possibly can. Anything that I bring in, I can't go out and spend it. And this is what's happening right now. People are very nervous. And we see the automobile industry, sales have fallen and missed for 2 months in a row. Even with the subprime program, anyone that has a heartbeat can come in and buy a car. Let me just say, without a job or a part-time job, it's very hard to go in and try to purchase something like this. Because again, most of the people can't make the payments as they go forward, and this is completely obvious from the increase of delinquencies, and it is getting worse as time goes on. Now, in the real estate industry, what are we seeing? Well, we know that Fannie and Freddie, they created the program where you can only have 3% down. You only need 3% down. And I've been saying that new home builders, a lot of times they will pay for your closing costs. They will pay for the down payment. But don't worry. The BBVA Compass is back, and they're going to help moderate income borrowers overcome barriers to home ownership. New home programs help qualifying borrowers meet down payment closing costs. It's part of banks' effort to support low and moderate income individuals and help them purchase a home. So what are they doing? What's going on right now? Well, they are allowing borrowers who qualify to finance up to 100% of the home's value. When did we see this? That's right. Let's go back to 2006, 2007, 2008. We saw the same thing happen then. We are repeating everything that led up to the crash of 2008. But this time it's going to be worse. Actually, the bank will even kick in $4,500 to closing costs. You can move into a home with zero. We saw this happen, and guess what? Since you have no investment in this home, it is very easy to leave the home when everything starts to fall apart. And we saw this back in 2007, 2008, during the crash going into 2009, where people just left their homes because they knew they just could not afford them. The question is, how do you qualify for a 100% mortgage? Well, that's very easy. All you need to do is meet one or two of these qualifications. The property must be either located in a low to moderate income census tract, or the applicants on the loan cannot have an income greater than 80% of the HUD median income for the area. So they're trying to bring in as many people as they possibly can to pump up the real estate industry. Again, all they're doing is blowing the bubbles larger and larger. That is it. And we see the stock market bubble, the NASDAQ, they're reaching all-time new highs. The bubble is inflating bigger and bigger. The automobile industry, the bubble is inflating. The student loan, it's inflating. The derivative market, it's inflating. You name it, wherever they can do it, they're just pumping it in. And again, when you put junk in, you get junk back out. And it's 100 times worse. So what they're throwing in there, all the subprime, 0% down, it's going to come back to haunt us, just like it did in 2008. But this time, it's going to be much, much worse. We've seen back in time when the stock market, the NASDAQ, when they reached all-time new highs, it ended in disaster. Back in October 2002, the NASDAQ hit a post-dot-com bubble low of 1108. From there, it went on an impressive run. In late 2007, it briefly moved above the 2,800 mark before losing more than half of its value during the crash of 2008. Now, we're going back to 5,000 in the NASDAQ, 17 to 18,000 points in the Dow, the S&P 2,000. Where do you think this is all going to end up? Everything's going to be wiped out, but you have to remember, this time, the government is not going to step in and bail out all these banks. And this is why they created the bail-in documents. This is why they are prepared. This is why they added the amendment to the spending bill to protect them from a derivative collapse where the FDIC will step in and bail them out. And you know the FDIC only has a certain number of dollars. They're not prepared for this, and all that's going to go to the derivative market. None of it is going to go to the depositors. So where are they going to get the money? They're going to go into the people's accounts. It's called bail-ins. The U.S. has a bail-in document. Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, you name it, they're ready for it. England, they have it. And we can see already in Austria, there's a bad bank. Bondholders are feeling the painful impact of the EU's new bank resolution regime and bank bail-ins for the first time after Austrian government said it would not pour any money into the bad bank. They were coming up short of about 7.6 billion euros. So guess what they're going to do? They're going to go inside and do a bail-in, but this bank has no depositors, it's bondholders, so the bondholders are going to lose their money because they're going to use the bail-in documents and they're going to go inside and take what they need to help the bank out. And we're going to see this occur throughout Europe, throughout the US, in England, in Canada, when everything collapsed. There is only one reason they created all of this. Because they're ensuring that they're okay. And when I say they, I'm talking about the central bankers. You have to remember, they have no allegiance to countries, to the people. The only allegiance they have is to themselves and to profit and to debt. That is it. And if they have to choose, they're going to choose themselves. Not the country, not the people. And we can see already by what they're doing, they are choosing themselves, creating the bail-ins, adding the rider on the spending bill to protect them from the derivative crash. We even have the Irish finance minister, Michael Noonan. He warned in June 2013, bail-in is now the rule. And it is. That is the rule. This is what they're going to use. And as we know, when countries don't have the revenue coming in, I mean, Greece doesn't have the revenue coming in, Cyprus doesn't have the revenue coming in, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, United States, England, all these countries do not have the revenue coming in to pay for the amount of debt. Canada, for instance. And what does every country do? They try to find more and more revenue. This is how we know we're at the end game. I mean, the United States came up with Obamacare. They came up with FATCA. They're trying to find revenue anywhere. Outside the country, doesn't matter where. We see Spain right now. They are hunting for taxes because their debt is way too high and they don't have the revenue. A lot of people are unemployed. So Spain wants to collect taxes for citizens on Facebook and Twitter using what they say on the social media. And they're going to track you down to see if you owe taxes. Or maybe you're hiding them. Spain has its financial police to hunt down its own citizens and shake them down or imprison them as they are desperate for money. And we can see the same thing is happening in every single country that is hooked to the private Western Central Bank. Here in the United States, this is exactly what is going on. They are hunting down those people and imposing more and more taxes on the people. If you notice, everything that they're coming out with now has a tax linked onto it. They want to tax you more as time goes on. And even when the government comes out and says, hey, no, this tax is for the rich. No, it is not, because what they do is they lure you in with that, saying, it's only going to be for the rich. But what happens is the next year it comes down to the middle class, then it comes down to the poor, and then everyone is taxed the same. But again, then the wealthy, the corporations, they know how to launder their money so they don't have to pay taxes, like that scandal with HSBC. Now, there seems to be a scandal with Hillary Clinton, as she was the Secretary of State, and she was working for the government, and you're supposed to be using the government email system so they can keep track of everything and store it. And it seems that Hillary Clinton was using her personal email. And again, as we look at the situation, we know this was done on purpose. She didn't want anyone to see what she was doing with her email. Come on. They know that you're supposed to be using government email system to talk to other people, not your Hotmail account, not your Yahoo account. And the reason why she most likely did this is because if something should occur, like Benghazi, she didn't want any emails found. You couldn't track them down. There's no backup. They don't exist. So basically, for 4 years, there are no paper trails. There's nothing. So when DHS was looking for stuff, because of the Freedom of Information Act, and they called on DHS saying, let me see these emails, they couldn't. What were they looking for? There were no emails. There was nothing. She didn't even have an account. Now, what was she hiding? This was completely done intentionally. But don't worry. The NSA must have everything that she was talking about, right? Because they have been collecting everyone's emails. Let's go to the NSA. It's almost when Lois Lerner with the IRS scandal, when all the emails just vanished because her computer hard drive crashed. But we know for a fact emails aren't kept there. They're kept on a server. And they were using Microsoft Exchange, and everything is kept in there. And they make backups regularly. The same thing with the government. And again, under federal law, letters and emails written and received by federal officials, such as the Secretary of State, are considered government records and are supposed to be retained so that congressional committees, historians, and members of the news media can find them. There are exceptions to the law for certain classified and sensitive materials. And she didn't abide by this because she was hiding something. She didn't want paper trails. This is the only reason someone would do this. Now, Ron Paul was out there, and we know that DHS has been funded for another week, and I think that week time frame is coming up. And it seems like they're trying to push through the new DHS bill. And of course, we all know it's going to go through. And Ron Paul was out there saying the American people would be much better off if Congress transferred the few constitutional functions performed by Homeland Security to other parts of the government and then shut down the rest of the department. I agree with him. I mean, we have DHS, but what do we need it for? They haven't stopped any terrorists. They placed TSA in the airport. They haven't found anything. They haven't stopped a terrorist. And what do they actually do? What, immigration, protecting the borders? No, they're not doing that too well. What exactly do they do? I mean, I see a lot of stories about football games and other things and graduation classes, but what do? They do absolutely nothing. Actually, if they disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. Basically, they're dormant right now. When they are activated by the government, because it is their police force that the government controls, we will see a completely different side of DHS. But for right now, they don't do anything. Absolutely nothing. Now, I reported on Chicago and their black site, where they're taking people into this warehouse location and they're torturing them, and they can't see a lawyer. They don't get due process. They get nothing. And when you look at the situation, you realize what this is. It's a black site. And we can see that they're using the NDAA right now, the National Defense Authorization Act. Because in that, and we talked about this before, the government, the authorities, are allowed to take people and detain them indefinitely without due process. Back in 2012, the current language in the National Defense Authorization Act, the federal government can now legally, indefinitely detain Americans as long as they commit a belligerent act. What is belligerent? Angry and aggressive, feeling or showing readiness to fight. So basically what the president, or it seems anyone, because this is the law of the land, they can take these people and detain them. And we see this is the first one that has popped up that we know of. You know there are more around the country, and we're going to see as weeks go by and months go by, others will start popping up. Now, of course, the police forces, the government officials, they're not going to come out and tell us where they are. Information will be leaked. We will find out, just like this one was. And we can see right now that the people in the Chicago area, the activists, they want an explanation of what is going on here. They want it shut down. But again, as we can see, this is part of closing down an open society. And we've seen over time now that there are 10 steps, and there's maybe 1 or 2 left, and then this society is completely closed down. And before you know it, people are going to start waking up going, wait a minute, where did this person go? They left, and I can't find them. Well, in the middle of the night, they might have just been taken away to one of these areas. And of course, they don't need anything to pick you up. They'll just pick you up and say you were belligerent. You committed a belligerent act. They don't have to prove anything. There is no proof. And this means they're trying to get rid of the rights of the people, to convince them that this is the new normal. Well, this is the problem right now, is that we are not going to stand for this. This is not the new normal, and these sites need to be closed down, and the government inside of Chicago, the government for the federal government of the United States, they need to explain why this is happening. And you know what's going to happen. They're not going to. And then we're going to go out peacefully and say, you know something? You are in violation of the Constitution. It is time for you to step down. And of course, you know they're not going to do this either, because people in power do not give up their power that easily. Why would you want to quit a good thing? They wouldn't. And they have a certain agenda. And this is why we need not 1,000, not 10,000, not 100,000. We need millions of people to come together at one point to say, no, we are not doing this. And right now, what we are doing is getting the message out there. This is stage one, because you cannot start a movement unless people are informed about what is going on. And this is we are in the process of doing this at this time. We've seen other people who've tried to put marches together and say, oh, we're going to meet up in Washington. You've seen videos on YouTube about this. They failed every single time. The question is why? Because people are not outraged yet. They're not informed. It's too early. But as time goes on, there's going to be a moment in time when it will be ready. And myself, my family, we will be in Washington. We will be there to stand up and say enough is enough. And I hope when that time comes, everyone out there joins me. But I don't believe there's enough people right now to do this. I don't think there's enough people who have woken up. I don't think there's enough people that are ready to do this, to say, my back is against the wall. I am ready to give everything to fight for this country. I don't think it's there yet. I think it's growing, but I don't think we're there just yet. Now, out in Russia, we see that the Russians want their ships from the French. They promised and they signed a contract to build the Mistral ships, and they have not been delivered. So Russia's communications minister has reportedly called for sectorial sanctions against French-based communication companies in reply to the scuttled delivery of the Mistral warships. Russia is now placing sanctions on France because the pressure from from US and NATO to not deliver these ships on the French government is strong right now, and they're listening, and they're saying, okay, we can't do this. But again, the French government would love to deliver the ships. They want the money. They want the contract to go through. And they just can't do it at this point. Now, Gazprom, as we know, delivers the gas into Ukraine. And we understand that Ukraine is on a payment schedule where they have to pay and then they get the gas. And right now, the supplies of Gazprom gas to war-torn regions in the southeastern Ukraine will not be accounted to Kiev's prepaid gas volumes of the current winter package. The amounts of the gas that have been recently supplied by Gazprom to certain regions will now be factored out because they're separate and apart from Ukraine. This is the way Gazprom is seeing this. We see the situation in Ukraine is getting worse as time goes on. It is falling apart. The Central Bank of Ukraine is raising its benchmark interest rates to 30%. They are seeing hyperinflation. Actually, the hyperinflation is really around 272%. Of course, everything that we're seeing is coming from the official government numbers, but when you look at this, they're really saying it's about 272%. The value of their currency is dropping. It is worth absolutely nothing. And this is why people are rushing in to purchase as much as they can. And I'm sure their shelves are being cleared out. And this is something we are going to see here in the United States. As soon as the dollar is dropped and other countries say, listen, I can purchase this oil not using the dollar. I don't need to keep it in reserves. That the currency will come flooding back to the United States, and we will see the devaluation of the dollar, especially when China and Russia start using the ruble or the yuan renminbi, and they start bypassing the dollar further. They have been doing it, but as time goes on, when less and less countries use it, the dollar will lose its value, and we will see that. Now, the Ukrainian president is going to set up a commission to amend constitution. This is all part of the Minsk II agreement, where they have to go ahead and make constitutional amendments to decentralize the power. And Poroshenko has signed a decree to set up a commission to do this. We'll have to see what he actually comes out with, because most of the time it's not exactly what everyone thinks he's going to do. It's actually the opposite. Now, Donetsk, Lugansk agreed to a permanent OSCE monitoring at 10 hotspots. They're saying, yes, we need this, and they're looking at the contact line where they're saying, let's put in the OSCE to monitor all these areas. We see the OSCE has confirmed that Donetsk and Lugansk, that they're withdrawing heavy weapons from the contact line, and we see that the OSCE is not providing a clear answer on what Kiev is doing at this point. And we have reports that Kiev is actually looking at Donetsk and Lugansk, watching them pull back their heavy artillery, and they're moving theirs up to the contact line. That looked like they were pulling it back, and then they moved it forward. And again, we know they are pushing for a major offensive. We see Yatsenyuk. He has sent a Ukrainian politician, and they are meeting with U.S. senators in Washington to negotiate on arms supplies to Ukraine. Sooner or later, what's going to happen is lethal weapons are going to enter into Ukraine through the proper channels. Right now, they're doing it covertly behind the scenes, where nobody knows what's going on. And of course, the corporate media and the U.S. government saying, no, we're supplying absolutely no lethal weapons to them whatsoever. But we know for a fact that, yes, this is exactly what they are doing. China is out there warning the U.S. to stop its Ukrainian proxy war against Russia. They know the West is behind all of this. And we have to look at the situation. Russia, China, Iran, Syria, North Korea, they know what is coming. And there are other countries, Venezuela, Brazil. They realize the United States government, central bankers, they are preparing for war. They understand the dollar is collapsing. They understand from history what happens. This is nothing new. They realize that, yes, they're going to continually they're going to continually push. They will not stop until they provoke a war. And this is what they're doing right now. Russia and Egypt, as we know, they signed agreements, military agreements, and they're going to hold a joint naval drill in the Mediterranean in 2015. NATO operation Atlantic Resolve expands to Bulgaria and Romania. In the next 4 months, the United States will be expanding its commitment to these areas. So, basically, what's happening here is NATO is continually expanding, moving military assets in. The U.S. is moving military assets in, setting this up, preparing. Russia has just released like 50 new ships, and they are getting prepared because the United States government central bankers, they are pushing war, and Russia is getting ready. China is getting ready. Iran, Syria, North Korea, they understand, and they're positioning also because they don't want to be caught off guard. So everyone is getting ready for war. Now, Netanyahu, he was invited in by Senator Boehner, and he is giving a speech in front of Congress. Actually, it already happened. And as we know, that every time he is giving a speech, he's always talking about Iran's threat, how they're going to build a bomb. And when you're watching the speech, all of Congress is up applauding and everyone's happy. Now, Obama didn't attend this. He wasn't going to attend because he didn't invite him into Congress. He didn't invite him to the U.S. And we can see that Congress invited him in, which is actually against the Logan Act, where this is really a violation, and the Congress really has no place to do this. I mean, if you look at the Logan Act, which was created in 1799 on January 30th, 18 U.S.C. Section 953 is a United States federal law that forbids unauthorized citizens from negotiating with foreign government. It was passed in 1799 and last amended in 1994. A violation of the Logan Act is a felony punishable under the federal law with imprisonment up to 3 years. So Senator Boehner, unless he was instructed by the White House, who is allowed to go out and deal with foreign governments, he is in violation of the Logan Act. But it doesn't matter at this point because Netanyahu already gave his speech. And no one really decided to follow up on this or look into it because, again, most of these people are above the law. And you have to remember, AIPAC and the Israeli government funds a lot of these congressmen. And we see that Benjamin Netanyahu was here in the United States 2 weeks before Israeli elections. And we need to remember, he's talking about Iran, he's talking about the Iranian nuclear deal. Israel is not part of the P5+1 talks whatsoever. So he really has no business being here whatsoever to talk about anything. But again, he was there and he was talking about Iran. It's a threat. They're going to build nuclear weapons. And we have to look back in time once again. Over 30 years, Israel, the United States, every so often, like a year or 2 years, they come out with Iran is building a nuclear weapon. They're going to be 3 to 5 months away. Iran is building a nuclear weapon. They're going to be 6 weeks away. And they continually do this. They continually cry wolf. They scare everyone. And we have to remember, Iran has been inspected by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they never found anything that has to do with a nuclear weapon. Iran signed the NPT, the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. This was signed on July 1st, 1968. Israel never signed the NPT. Of course, they say they don't have nuclear weapons, but we know they do. Now, there are reasons why Iran is not a threat. They have not started a war in over 200 years. And Iran is not building nuclear weapons. Reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency has concluded that Iran is not building nuclear weapons. Typical American media accounts highlighted the increase in Iran's nuclear infrastructure, underground centrifuge production, but they failed to mention that their stockpile of 20% enriched uranium, the only material capable of being enriched further to 85% or weapons grade, had actually diminished as a result of conversion to fuel plates for use in the Tehran research reactor, which produces medical isotopes. They just use all these terms to scare you, and of course most of the information is coming out of Israel. A civilian nuclear program is not easily converted into a weapons program. Before a country can begin the latter, it must break the IAEA monitoring seals on its uranium stockpile, which is also under constant camera detection. It must also kick out international inspectors who have access to all of Iran's nuclear sites. Iran is not an existential threat to Israel. Again, Israel did not sign the NPT and repeatedly refuses propositions for a Middle East nuclear weapons-free zone. Iran's leadership is not fanatical or crazy or suicidal. I mean, if we look at what General Martin Dempsey said, he's the chairman of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we are of the opinion that the Iranian regime is a rational actor. And we look at the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, Chief of General Staff, Major General Benny Gantz. I think Iranian leadership is composed of very rational people. But American policymakers began to echo Israeli claims during the 1990s, largely in a public and without evidence to back them up. They just continually repeat the same thing, that they're going to have a nuclear weapon. They're going to have a nuclear weapon. These assertions continued in a steady drumbeat of increasingly hostile rhetoric, non-stop, ongoing, never ending. And we can see right now what they want is the U.S. to attack Iran. And of course, we know there's a peace deal going on. Do I think the United States really wants peace with Iran? No, I think what they really want, they want access to the central banking system. They want all the oil to be sold using the dollar. I think this has nothing to do with nuclear weapons whatsoever. I think this is an illusion to get into their system. This is why they wanted the IMF to come in and take a look at the banking system in Iran. And every time they're close to a deal, what does the U.S. do? They throw in another demand that wasn't there before. And they continually do this. Now we see that the coalition forces out in the Middle East, they're getting ready for a major offensive. Italy is going to be sending more weapons, more instructors to Iraq to fight the Islamic State. Australia is going to be sending 300 more troops to Iraq on a training mission. They've already sent 600 and 200 special force soldiers to help fight the Islamic State. And we see Australia troops will join around the 140 New Zealand Defence Force members. And we can see that more and more military assets are being brought into this area. More soldiers, more boots on the ground, because they are preparing for a major, major offensive in this area. Now we understand in Iraq, U.S. forces, Iraqi forces, coalition forces, they're attacking Tikrit. But what's very interesting about this is that the Islamic State is reportedly pulling back, getting ready for this attack. So they know ahead of time, and they're removing their forces. And what's left there for the coalition forces to attack? The people in this area who are trying to take back their country. And this is what the Islamic State does. They move into an area, they show their flags, they create chaos in the area, and they make it seem like, yes, the Islamic State are all these people who are in this area, but these people are the people of Iraq who want their country back. And this is how they're fooling everyone. It's the same thing happening in Yemen, same thing happening in Libya, same thing happening in Lebanon. They need the Islamic State there to convince everyone that terrorists have control of the country. No, that is not true. The people are rising up, and this is where they're getting the numbers of 50,000, 80,000, 100,000, because it is the people of the country, and this is what they are fighting right now. Now we see that the Free Syrian Army, as they're getting trained, as they're getting weapons, they are continually defecting over to the Islamic State. More moderate FSA fighters has now officially defected to the side of the Islamic State, and they have large quantity of American weapons, including TOW anti-tank rockets and other arms. So those all transferred over to the Islamic State, and this is all part of the strategy. Train the Free Syrian Army, make it look like we're supporting, or the United States government, central bankers are supporting the moderates, have them defect over to the Islamic State so their ranks build, and they're no longer controllable. They can go wherever they want. They're not bound by governments. They're a terrorist organization. The UN can't tell them what to do, compared to the Free Syrian Army, when they can look into acts of horrific torturing and things like that. If it's the Islamic State, all the United States has to do is say, we have nothing to do with this. This is a terrorist organization. But again, behind the scenes, what do we know? They are the ones who are controlling this proxy army. They are the ones who are funding them. They are the ones who are supplying them with weapons. And it's all being done covertly. Except when you look at the new media, the alternative media, we're calling the United States, Israel, UK, and other nations out on it. And showing that, yes, this is a proxy army, because everywhere the Islamic State is, that's where the U.S. government, central bankers need to go back into or want to go. If you think about it, why hasn't the Islamic State made a move on Israel or any other country in this region? They haven't. They're only in those areas that the U.S. government needs to get into or wants to get into. That's it. It's very simple. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.